Hello, Warrior family. I hope you're all doing well. Today, I'm going to be sharing with you an old podcast from a conversation I had with Sarah Milne Rowe. Sarah has an incredible podcast called Better Under Pressure, and it really was a fantastic conversation to be a part of because myself and Sarah are very aligned with how we see pressure. I feel like pressure is getting a bit of a bad rep these days. I feel like a lot of people have an unhealthy relationship with pressure. But rarely do we achieve anything brilliant without pressure in our lives. It's more about resilience and how we're able to cope with pressure than anything else. So in this great conversation, we have a good chat covering lots of topics, like why I'm thankful for negative thoughts, how we can translate pressure into performance, and essentially the growth of the Warrior Academy and what led us to building a character development center in the UAE, in the UK, and now around the world. So I really hope you enjoy this podcast episode from December 2022. Make sure you subscribe if you don't want to miss another episode.
Seb, fantastic to have you.
Thank you for having me, Sarah.
Oh, I'm really excited about this conversation. You are in the bucket of potentially being a bit of a pressure junkie, so I want to unpick that a little bit because there's lots of richness in there, I think. When do you remember first experiencing a feeling of pressure, and how would you describe it?
First experiencing pressure. So I grew up in an army environment. I grew up in Aldershot. My dad was a para. And so from a very young age, I kind of experienced the pressure of performing to a high level physically, I would say. My life was at that age, 6 to 8, filled with abseiling off garages, doing assault courses, watching my dad jump out of planes all the time, all this sort of stuff. So I guess pressure for me started from a young age doing various physical challenges. I think that the family I've grown up in, we are very, very competitive. And so for what would have felt like pressure for some people would have been normal. So I can't really go back to that period where I first, when I was in my younger years and see that as pressure, because that would just be normal life. But if you pick that apart, you can probably find pressure. So for me, if I had to look back, I'd probably say when I first started competing in martial arts to a higher level. And the thing about martial arts is you're kind of on your own in the arena, in the ring, whatever it is, right? So you're the one handling that pressure on your own, even if you're only 7 or 8 years old. I think I started when I was about 7 or 8. I did my first English championships when I was about 9. And so, there's no one there with you. You have to understand and translate pressure into performance. And so I think that learning to do that at that age would have been my first kind of experience of high pressure.
But what's so interesting already in this conversation is that, and it reminds me actually, because last week I spoke to Tendi Sherpa, who told the story of, for him, pressure began when he was 5 because he used to walk for 2 days. He had to have a 2-day walk to go to school, meeting tigers and bears. I mean, it was like something out of a fantasy book, to be honest. But what I think is interesting in what you're saying, which is connected to that, is when you're introduced to pressure as not being debilitating, I suppose, you were given a very positive view of pressure at a very young age. I'm getting more and more convinced that when we get given that picture earlier, it sort of already starts to strengthen something that feels very powerful. And that's what I'm hearing from you a little bit. And then so you go then into an environment of martial arts where you're very much on your own. You haven't got your dad, you haven't got, that, but you've already got a bit of a muscle worked up to be able to deal with that, I'm assuming.
Yeah, 100%. It's really interesting you should say that as well, because, I kind of feel like pressure's getting a bit of a bad rap these days, right? People are kind of avoiding pressure and seeing pressure as this big negative thing where, you really don't tend to get things done without a higher level of pressure, or at least a decent amount of pressure to cause a change. And so for me, especially having worked with, we're essentially talking about children, right, at this stage. And so we're not, having worked with kind of 25,000 children around the world, there is a fine balance.
What you're doing now, you mean? Yeah.
Over the last 10, 12 years.
Yeah.
With what I'm doing now with the Warrior Academy. Yeah. I mean, it's the insights I've got from that are there's really there's a relationship with pressure, like you say, or the comfort zone. And there's a relationship with, how the parents see it. And for a lot of different cultures that we teach, for some parents, they really overly pressure their kids and they develop an unhealthy relationship for it. Okay. And some parents under pressure their kids. And I kind of see it like the comfort zone, because in the comfort zone, you obviously got everyone's familiar with the classic comfort zone, right? We know we need to leave our comfort zone in order to grow, but that's where we pretty much leave it, comfort zone, and then the good stuff happens. It's not quite like that. For a lot of people, they've got the comfort zone. They know how to leave that. But for highly competitive parents, they push their children outside of their comfort zone into the hyper anxiety stage. And so this is where they are performing tasks way outside of their ability. They can't complete it. And then they retract back in that comfort zone and they don't want to do it again. And they build an unhealthy relationship with pressure. And so I've kind of seen it from both angles. I've seen it from someone pushing their kids way too much and someone pushing them outside of their comfort zone so it becomes normal and they have that healthy relationship and they want to repeat it again. So yes. I've definitely seen it from both sides. And
how, as a kid, do you feel you got that healthy balance with it? Because you could easily have come from a father like, the one you described, who's got a very high challenging job with pressure. How do you see it staying healthy? What were the ingredients that allowed it for you, from what you remember anyway, being healthy?
I think one of the key things I found with encouraging pressure from a young age is there's got to be some sort of reward structure in place. What a child is typically very extrinsically motivated, right? And a lot of our work with kids is developing drive in young people. To do that, we need to take them from extrinsic to intrinsic motivation. Mm-hmm. Early on, they need a lot of rewards, they need small goals, they need all this sort of stuff which build that drive. What I found, and one of the biggest mistakes which contributes to this unhealthy relationship with pressure, is that there is no reward. So typically what you'll find is a child goes and does something outside of their comfort zone, comes back, and there's no kind of, big celebration about what they've done. Whereas when I look back to my childhood, the whole family would come together to celebrate, one of our successes. No matter if it was a friendly football game or some sort of success at school or a big, national competition, the whole family would be celebrating the whole evening. And so that really builds a solid reinforcement of the relationship between pressure and success, and that good feeling and that dopamine hit of, look what I've achieved, I want to do it again. And then you've got that solid foundation of, the community there to support you when things don't go right. And even when things didn't go well, it was having that, when you experience failure, having that same support in place. So for me, those are the kind of secret ingredients, if you like, that they seem obvious, but people so often forget them.
Yeah. Yeah. So there you're talking very much around the people around you also celebrating, so that you're feeling like, yes, I've stretched, I've done something, and I've got myself out of my comfort zone, and it's I love this idea of the reward. How do you do that when you're on your own? So having moved then into martial arts and then becoming a very high performer within the martial arts, before setting up Warrior Academy, how did you start to learn to do that on your own?
I think you gradually learn to plan goals and plan rewards. But do you know what? If I'm completely honest, I'm absolutely terrible at it. Like I don't really feel like I need rewarding. This is just a way of life for me. Right. Do you know what I mean? It's and I think I think from a young age, right? When I was referring to that, I was really referring to how children need constant rewards for what they do in order to build that relationship. But I kind of feel as I've got older, and this might have thrown a spanner in the works to maybe some of the typical kind of ideas around it. But as I've got older, I don't feel like I need as much personal rewarding, group rewarding for what I do. I feel the satisfaction in achieving that myself, and I kind of internalize that as, I've achieved this. I feel a sense of pride with it, but very, very quickly I'm on to the next thing. Like I'm just excited by the acceleration from one thing to the next.
So I think that's interesting. That's interesting though, Seb, I think, because as human beings, we desire progress, right? That's what we're here to do. So what you've just described there beautifully, for me anyway, is the reward is in the progress.
Yeah.
You can see movement.
Yeah. So for me, it's I'm very, very aware as I grow from one stage to the next stage that it's a kind of a self-rewarding process, which just happens. And I just enjoy the whole journey of it. It doesn't matter if it goes up and down or sideways. I know what I've signed up to, right? And I just enjoy the journey through it.
Let's look again at one of the secret ingredients Seb's mentioning here. One that we so often forget and yet is integral to becoming better under pressure. The power of celebration in growing belief. When we take time to celebrate both together and individually, we're reinforcing the relationship between pressure and success and building a sense of pride and courage to continue. And how when we celebrate as a team, we're creating a community of support for when things don't go so well. Collectively enjoying the journey and the progress, whether it goes, as Seb describes it, up, down or sideways. It made me think about how often celebration is overlooked, particularly when we're feeling under pressure. Actually investing time and energy in celebration can power up both personal and collective self-belief and potentially lay the foundations for a system that builds intrinsic motivation.
I'm reflecting on your distinction between intrinsic and extrinsic motivation because, as an ex-teacher myself, I became very aware of that. The majority of every class were extrinsically motivated. So they needed the mark. They needed the sense of, acknowledgement. But randomly, you'd meet one child, and I'm thinking of one in particular, actually, who never needed that. He never needed that. He was a very high achiever and actually didn't even, when you marked his work, he didn't really care. And yet it didn't stop him from wanting to be better. So I'm wondering, in your story, with the reward was extrinsically there and then it became intrinsic, or whether it was always intrinsic, Seb, for you. I'm just very curious about that.
Yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it? What has it always been intrinsic? I think as a young man, you typically base your kind of the way in which you approach growth and stuff onto your father, and your relationship between you and your dad as a young bloke is kind of vital, right? For those who have a male role model in their lives. And I think that I've seen in a lot of cases where, a young boy hasn't had that praise as he's grown up, and they actually spend the rest of their life trying to seek praise from their father figure, even if their father's absent, right? So they go through their whole life not getting that. Whereas I feel like, the relationship I had with my dad, he was always very, he had very high standards, but he was also very, very supportive throughout that. So it's really hard for me to say, was it intrinsic or extrinsic? I feel like I was part of a system which taught me how to develop intrinsic motivation. And, that's the strategy we use with martial arts, right? So when a child joins us, if you look at the black belt journey, they go from white belt to black belt. You're typically, 3 to 4 months between each belt for the first 4 or 5 belts. We go even further in the Warrior Academy, and there's lots of little stages between each belt as well. So every single week, they're trying to earn something to get to the next stage. So those are very, very close together. And then as they start to develop this drive and this relationship with pressure, you start to move these big goals further apart. Now the belts are 6 to 8 months apart. Then they're 12 to 15 months apart. And then they can be 2 to 3 years apart. And one of the funny things I say to our parents is, when you're first joining us, your kids are white belt, you're packing them bags, trying to get them to get to class and, really encouraging them to be there. But when your child is a black tag going for their black belt, they're packing your bags. They're trying to get you to get to class early so they can, go and perform in the class. And so that's the achievement, right? It's being in that system which encourages you to have that intrinsic motivation and handle pressure and internalize pressure in a different way.
Yeah. Fascinating on so many levels here. So is there a moment that really feels like that was the toughest pressure I've ever had to deal with and I came through it?
Been quite a few of those, if I'm honest. I have to try and pick one. The toughest pressure. Something that really stands out to me would be when I did my first professional fight in Thailand. So I was sitting in this restaurant after, in Thailand, after several months of training up for this fight, right? And as I sit at the restaurant eating my last meal before I go and do this fight, I look at the posters that have all been handed out around the restaurant. And on the poster was a big picture of me and a big picture of this Thai fighter. And it looks like I'm the main event, but there's got to be a mistake with that because it's my first fight. And why would I be the main event? And it's during the Queen's birthday in Thailand. So it's this massive event in Thailand. And so I grabbed this poster and I speak to one of the other local Thai guys and I'm like, this is me. Who am I against? And they found it quite funny. And then they looked at me and they realized, this is actually quite serious. The guy you're against is a veteran fighter with over 40 fights. And so, I realized kind of in that moment, I'd been set up to lose. So in Thailand, what they often do is actually fix fights so that people lose. They'll put a really experienced person against a beginner so that they can put them in a situation where they can bet on the winner who they know is going to win and they make lots of money. There's a lot of gambling in Thailand. So I'd been set up to lose this fight. And I could just, I can feel, even now kind of talking about it, I can feel, the same feelings of, being set up to lose is a horrible feeling. And knowing, it's a bit like going to the guillotine, knowing you have no choice. So I jumped on my motorbike and I went down to my mentor, Ped, who been training me up for this fight 8 hours every day, living and breathing Thai boxing with me. A trainer is very much involved with the fight. They are so attached to the win and lose of this and the emotional side of building up for that just as much as the fighter. And so I knock on his door, push open the door, and he's there lying on a mattress on the floor with a fan on him and his son and his wife as well. And he comes to the door and he looks at me and he realizes, that I'm fighting in an hour and I'm mentally not ready. And, I show him the poster. And he then realizes in that moment that I'd been set up to lose. And he didn't directly say that to me, but I could see it. I could see his face drop, right? And so I'm looking at my trainer. I'm thinking, shit, I've been set up to lose, and all I want to do is escape. So I'm just thinking, here's the pressure. I want to escape. What can I do to get out of this? Can he make a phone call and change the fighter? What can he do? And can I just cancel? Yes. And so, what he did, and he absolutely nailed it as a mentor, right? He looked at me in the eyes. He put his hand out on my heart, on my chest here, and he could feel my heart rate just going through the roof. And he said to me, he looked at me in the eyes and he said to me, not matter, you fight you. And I realized right up until that point, there had been no fighter that I was against. I didn't know who the other person was. They could be having hundreds of, professional fights. It didn't matter. No one was forcing me to be in that ring every single day, 8 hours every single day, the diet, the training, the sacrifice, everything. Every time I was training, it was just me against me anyway. So this was no different. And what was really cool about it was everyone there was expecting me to lose. So I kind of approached that pressure as actually just turning up. I've kind of done a good job, right? And then I jumped on the back of a motorbike with him. We went down to the arena, jumped in the ring, tapped gloves with this guy, this faceless fighter. I didn't care who he was. I was kind of filled with courage at that point. And I think when you're filled with courage and you watch yourself do it, almost kind of third person, watching yourself do something that 2 minutes ago, even though you're in the moment, you're still feeling that fear. It starts to build confidence. And there's almost this question, right? Of what if I could actually do this? What if I could win this? And so I'm fighting this guy, and my whole strategy was low kicks. So if I can get him with low kicks, he was renowned for, getting in close contact, elbows, knees, this sort of stuff, all close range strikes. So I wanted to keep a distance, do low kicks to his legs, which worked. 3 or 4 kicks in, I could see he was starting to feel it. But then he blocked one of my kicks perfectly. And it tore one of the muscles in my left calf, my right calf. And so now I was limping. I was in the 3rd round, and I could see Ped in the distance over there, and he was trying to show me to use a punch. And so that's sort of, I switched to punching, even though I realized that I had to then step in even further. So I think the pressure of building up to that fight, being set up to lose, getting injured during the fight, even though I felt like I had taken on as much pressure as I could, and then making the decision to go even further when I couldn't do more, just thinking to myself, if I just go for it, just go for it, just 1 minute more. And then I knocked the guy out in the 3rd round, and I'd won the match. And I had to leave very quickly because a lot of the gamblers are very upset, right?
Yeah, I bet.
It's packed out the stadium. But for me, it was understanding, how noticing yourself when you go through something of high pressure, noticing how your body reacts, and just observing. Because often what happens is people feel this, it's crippling, and they stop. But instead, observing how your body's reacting, and when I talk about base jumping and stuff, there is a physical reaction. Absolutely. Like you stand on the edge of a cliff when you base jump, and you're watching your legs shake, right? Your body's shaking like this, and you're just observing the pressure taking its effect on your body, and just noticing it, and it's there to keep you alive, right? So I just kind of, when I'm in that position, I just kind of thank my body for being there to support me, but being a bit like, I got this now. I'll take over from here. Slow down my breathing, and then now I'm in control. Bang, ready to go.
I love that, Seb. I love that for so many reasons, because, okay, so this was an extreme example, but this physical sensation first is so important, I think, for all of us in pressure, is that our body gives us fantastic signals. And what you're saying is, you're having a conversation. I mean, my word is you go meta on the feeling. You almost distance. You go meta, you look at it and you go, okay, thanks. I understand that. You're looking after me. Yes, this is a big event and I should be, concerned, but I've got it. I've got this. Makes so much sense. I think even if it's a meeting you're scared of, or even if it's, a conversation that you feel under pressure for, I think this body connection with what you're about to go to in pressure is the thing that you have to master. In quite a strong way, and it's part of the drill. And I love when you talked about your mentor, your trainer, putting his hand on your heart. I can remember going when I was doing some work with neurolinguistics. I remember somebody just literally taking somebody on stage and putting their hand on their heart and then tapping it out with a stick.
Wow.
And so you could hear how fast the heart was going, but because you almost gone meta on it by distancing yourself, because you were analyzing it through the stick, it started to slow.
Yeah. Do you know what? I've been fortunate enough to be surrounded by incredible mentors in my life. Fortunate, or I've sought them out, right? And one of my mentors in base jumping, he would say to me, if I was to ask you to stand on one leg, right? Stand on one leg on the floor and just slow down your breathing, you could do that no problem. There's absolutely no difference to doing that on the edge of a cliff. You stand on one foot on the edge of a cliff and you slow down your breathing, then you're in control, right? There's no reason any of that's different apart from the psychosomatic response of you dealing with fear. And so, I used to do that before every jump. I used to just stand on one leg, and if I couldn't control myself, then I wouldn't be able to control fine motor action, so I wouldn't jump. If I couldn't show myself that I can control my breathing doing a simple task, regardless of my geographical situation, wherever I am, then I would remove myself from that situation because I'm just not in the place to do it mentally.
The point that Seb highlights throughout these examples that I think is really worth banking is the importance of having a way to get fully present with a moment of pressure so we feel in control. We will always feel pressure physically first. It's our body reacting to any surprise, so we need a practice that reassures us. One that, despite the physical sensations we're experiencing, allows us to feel that we are nevertheless in control. I love this idea of being on the edge of a cliff and thinking, if I can stand on one leg and control my breathing, I'm good to go. And if I can't, I'm not mentally up for it. This is so useful when it comes to reassuring ourselves that we are more resourceful than we think. Creating a ritual that stress tests our own agency in pressure situations, so we can turn any pressure we face into a positive force that we can grow from. I don't think it matters where we are on the better under pressure scale, but having a ritual that helps us talk to the fear and say, do you know what, it's okay, thank you, I've got this. Or, thank you, I agree, now isn't the time. Either way, we are in control of the choice, whatever our metaphorical cliff may be.
So let's just get that straight. You're up a cliff high. I mean, when you talk about base jumps, we're not talking about little jumps, are we, Seb? Let's just be clear about this. Could you just give us a description of a typical base jump, please?
Yeah, but do you know what? With base jumping, the lower the jumps, the more dangerous, because you've got less time to open your parachute and that sort of stuff. So the jumps
Oh,
like that
okay.
of, you know, small cliffs and antennas and buildings and bridges, they're actually more dangerous than
Ah,
the bigger jumps. But the typical jump, one of the jumps I've done hundreds of times, is a beautiful cliff in Italy, called Monte Brento. And it's this, you hike for 4 hours up to this, and it's sunrise, and you're standing on the edge of this cliff point, and in front of you, it's 3,000 foot drop in front of you there, and you're kind of living in this environment where the eagles live, and the only thing up there is just like birds of prey, just kind of going around, and it's just completely silent. And there's something very spiritual about base jumping, because it's almost very primitive, and takes you back to what it is to be a human being. Right. And with such a busy modern life that we all lived, and in so many ways so soft, to go in that very raw existence where you're standing on the top of a mountain, feeling the wind, and it's just you and empty space in front of you, and you're the one making a decision to go or not. There's always this moment where your feet are on the edge of a cliff, and it's like a point of no return, right? You have to push off. But right now, when your feet are on the edge of the cliff, you're standing still, you're safe, you're not doing anything. But then you lean forward a little bit, and there's this moment where you're still on the cliff, but you're too far leaning forward to be safe anymore. So you have now decided you basically left the cliff, even though you're still attached to it. And I think that's a really interesting moment, right? Because you're right in the middle of whatever's going to happen. And then, when you do jump off a cliff, there's dead air first. So everyone practicing the skydive, when you do a skydive, it's windy, it's noisy. As soon as you jump out the plane, immediately you're hitting friction with the air. So there's no dead air. But the concept of dead air is that basically there's not enough speed for you to move in the wind. So when you jump off a cliff in a base jump, immediately you just drop 200 or 300 feet, and it feels exactly like dropping 200 or 300 feet. One of the things I also say about pressure or fear is that you can get used to anything. So people often say to me, what does that feel like? And actually, it feels pretty normal, because you can get used to it, right? That butterfly feeling you get when you jump off a high diving board, that only lasts a few seconds. And then a few seconds after that, believe it or not, even though your body's falling several hundred feet, you're actually able to breathe in, out, slow down, and then you've got friction with the wind, and you can start controlling your movement.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of a more raw insight into a base jump and what it's like to jump off a cliff.
What do you feel about the connect? Do you ever use that connection that you've just beautifully described there with decision making? Like, this might feel like a random question, but I'm quite intrigued as to, and I was intrigued when I spoke to Tendi as well, is there's something about the physical pressure that you put yourself under in an extreme situation like a base jump, for example. What can you learn from that enables you to make a decision that you might have to make in your business? Or, you told me, Seb, that during COVID, your business tanked. You had to make some very quick decisions to revamp it. Like, what's the relationship for you around your past and your high pressure physical endeavors to now running a business and the decisions that you're making that maybe not involve jumping, but they're still high pressure decisions? Is there any connection you make?
Yeah, absolutely. So much carryover from extreme sports to the business world. So many people that I mentor, and I mentor, several hundred people in business throughout the year. So many people that I mentor, they've got amazing ideas. They're so creative, and they can help so many people, but they just struggle to hit go. Right. And it's like, as you mentor people, it's just kind of frustrating, because you're like, I wish I could just kind of give you that ability just to hit go, because it's what you're doing is relatively safe. You're the way in which people are approaching it is that if it goes wrong, it's the end of the world. And the gift of doing extreme sports, where you're doing something very, very dangerous, is that you have a very different perspective on life. It's that in terms of the relationship, it's perspective. What makes decision-making easier is perspective, right? Like, if you're making a business decision, like you're quitting your job to go and, run a business or start your own business, what's the real risk? Like, you're not going to die, are you? Do you know what I mean? It's like, okay, you might, if it doesn't work, it might set you back a couple of years financially. You might have to go and get another job. At least you tried. What's the upside of this? One of the things you talk about is playing to win, right? Not playing not to lose. And I absolutely love that when I looked at the energy diagram as well. And it's, I see so many people who just need to shift into that way of thinking. What if this is the right way? This route will actually cause this knock-on effect, which will help me in whatever I'm doing in life. And so the carryover really for me is perspective. One of the great things about base jumping is you're constantly in a flow state. You're not thinking about your emails when you're jumping off a cliff. It's a case of you become very good at becoming present, because you train yourself so much that you need to think about this one thing with laser focus, and nothing else can distract you, because that one thing with laser focus is going to mean you live or you die. And it's as simple as that. I mean, you're in that community of base jumping as well. You kind of see death quite a lot. You hear about it, your friends go, all this sort of stuff. So the pressure there is enormous, because you're doing the same things that have killed people a week ago. And so it's no joke, right? You go up and you make the decision to do it despite all that. And so it all comes down to your perspective. And one of the things I often, before I'm making a really big decision, or if I feel myself having this scarcity mindset, is I will do something which really grounds me, but helps me with perspective. And that's essentially, I just accept the worst case scenario. So I take a piece of paper and I write down everything that could go wrong. It's like doomsday stuff, right? I do this, we'll be bankrupt, we won't be able to do this, I won't be able to afford to pay staff. And if the hospital bill comes in, I won't be able to pay that. I have to move out. I have to move back to England. I have to move my whole family to a studio apartment somewhere. We'll be homeless. Like, this is the worst case scenario, right? That piece of paper, I don't leave the desk until I've read through that piece of paper and created a plan for what I would do in that situation. So it's very practical, right? I'm a practical guy. All this motivation and Tony Robbins hoo-ha stuff, that's all great, and it gives people that motivation, that burst. But I'm very much like, cool, what are the steps we can actually take to control your mind and be in control? And this is one of them. So you take that worst case scenario and then you make a plan for that. Like, you basically accept that this has happened.
Yeah.
So the worst case scenario has happened. You've now got a plan for it. You take that piece of paper and you stick it in a drawer. Now you're able to fully focus on playing to win. Yeah. You've taken that scarcity mindset, the play not to lose, or how did you phrase it?
Playing not to lose, as opposed to
playing not to lose. And you've taken that piece of paper and it's in a drawer. Bang, the drawer shuts. Now all of your energy, because you've accepted that, right? All of your energy is now focusing on the positive side of, what if I can do this? What if I can become the person who does this? And if you look at, cultures from the past, right? You look at the Vikings, look at who are incredibly courageous, right? Look at the samurai, the Bushido code, all this sort of stuff. They fully accepted death.
Yes.
And for them, they had such a connection to death that it was like they were quite happy to go to war, to go into battle, whatever it was, with this full understanding that they might die. And if they did, it would bring honor to them and their families or whatever, right? As long as they were doing and they were living with courage. And so I take that same approach to business. I literally take that culture and I put it into business.
There's so much resonating for me. I mean, personally, I did something with a fabulous group that I'm part of called the Samurai Challenge in the summer, Seb. I never had a chance to talk to you about this, but it was exactly trying to connect your body to a war situation without going to war. And so much of his drilling with us was about the breath, getting right down in the pelvis, and feeling grounded, and that moment of presence that you're talking about in adversity, and having to make fast decisions when basically the whole game messes with your head, was so helpful. I found it so enriching and so powerful as a mechanism, this whole sort of samurai way of working. But also you're reminding me of other guests that I've had on the podcast, like Anna Rafferty from Lego, ferocious prioritization. Was her phrase, when we're not.
I love that. That's a great phrase.
It was a really good, powerful phrase. And And Julie Harris, who said, the thing she says is, what's the worst that can happen? And when you really look at what's the worst that can happen, you can then mitigate it, or at least you can then prepare yourself for it, or realize that actually it's not that bad after all, to be honest, when you really face it. So this practice of getting out of scarcity and into possibility feels very powerful.
Yeah. And do you know what, though? It's one, like I said to you, a lot of people talk about this sort of stuff, but to actually have techniques that do it.
I agree.
Do you know what I mean? It shouldn't just be a chat that you listen on a podcast and oh, cool. Yeah, we shouldn't have a scarcity mindset. No. Like, you need to teach yourself not to. There are exercises to do to do this, and it takes work. Like, you've got to put the work in. And I use base jumping and in extreme sports because they're very extreme examples of ultimately being close to the worst case scenario and having the courage and the decisiveness to make decisions very quickly that are life or death situations, right? But you don't just go from 0 to 100. You don't just do that and then that's it. You build up to that. You take small steps. For people who are listening to this and they struggle with making decisions on the spot, one of the great ways you can do that is by doing it through sport, right? If you can find a fast-paced sport that requires you to make decisions on the spot, that's one way of doing it, right? And that could be as part of a team, or it could be individually. If you do it individually, that's a great way of doing it, because then it's all on you, and it's that all on you energy, and being okay with it being all on you. That's leadership, right? I was speaking to one of my managers the other day, and he was he's taking over an event with about 300 people from me. And, I said to him, look, you're taking this over from me. You're in charge. And I said, how are you feeling about that? And he was like, yeah, I'm a little, I'm excited, but nervous and a little bit anxious and worried. What if things go wrong? And I said to him, at the end of the day, if things go wrong, I'm the last one out the door. It's all on me. It doesn't matter what you do. If you're in my team, it's all on me. You guys make a mistake, it comes back to me. If this whole event goes wrong, it's on me. And so I think that's leadership, right? Just having ownership over decisions, and that doesn't come from you don't just do that straight away. You build up to it through practice gradually. Yeah.
Let's stick on that for a little moment, Seb, about how you've grown your business. You've got a lot of people working with you and for you right now, and you're having a huge impact on children across the world, which is really inspiring mission, to be honest. But as you've always said, and I so agree, inspiration comes from real solid practice and effort. How do you build it? How is it that you're, I suppose the question is, how do you manage other people's pressure? Because you're going to have that. You've just given an example of one, but as you get more and more people working with you and for you, what would you say is a key requirement for managing others' pressure, particularly if it doesn't bother you? Like, you've probably got quite an immune system to pressure now that's pretty strong, right? But you're dealing with people that don't have that often, or they are building their immune system to it so that it can be a positive force in the way that we've been talking about. How do you do that with people then you bring them into your team?
Have you ever had a mentor who believed in you when you didn't believe in yourself?
Yes.
For me, it's becoming that person for them, right? So what I often say to parents, but we train their children, as I say, when you're trying to inspire someone, the first way in which you inspire them is through language. When you speak to someone, you literally paint a picture of what they'll become. So what I do, if I'm trying to inspire a leader to take over something, or I'm delegating and I need someone to take over something quite important, I'll sit down with them and I'll say, look, I don't know if you're aware of this, but I can really, really visualize you as this person. And then I'll describe that person in detail, right? So it becomes very visual in their mind. And I'll say that, I'll say to them, look, in my mind, you're already this person. Like I've seen you do this in my head 1,000,000 times. Until they kind of feel, oh yeah, I could do that. And I'll say to them, look, now for you to actually become that person, there are a few steps to take. And the steps are very, very simple, very, very predictable. And I'll guide you through those steps as we go, but you've got to be outside of your comfort zone for that journey. So the first thing is inspiring someone to actually want to become this character that you've imagined for them, someone who can handle that pressure, who can achieve those things. The next thing that you find is that on this journey, they kind of go off track, they go off piece, right? And so perspective becomes really important. Perspective is, joy. If this is a 10-point journey, right? Point 4, they're feeling low, they've experienced failure. It's making sure they're reflective of where they've come, and sitting them back and saying, do you remember when I sat down with you and I painted this picture of where you were going to become, and you didn't believe any of these steps were possible? And then I described that person that I met. I'll actually describe that person and say they struggle with this, they look like this, they worked on this was their focus, this was their mindset, these are the things they said to me. And then it's like a physical, oh man, I've really come a long way since that chat. These things happen, up and down, perspective, and then the techniques I speak about with accepting the worst case scenario, this sort of back and forth of, what if this goes wrong? What if it goes wrong? You're not going to die, are you? What if it goes wrong? What if it goes right? What if it goes right, you become this person? If it goes wrong, we just try again. And so I think perspective and believing in people and inspiring through words and painting a picture of what they can become. And it's mindset stuff, but it's all very practical, statical style.
So practical, but so important. And what I really respect about this conversation, about this element of raising others' game, holding them able is a phrase I like to use. Hold people able because they're not able to hold themselves, so you hold them able. And I think there's some gold dust in just what you've just shared, Seb, for one-to-one meetings in organizations. What I typically hear is that one-to-ones get bumped by their leaders. Everything becomes too busy. Or when they do have the one-to-ones, it's very tactical. It's like, I'm coming with my list of things to do. I'm going to come with my list of things to do. And it's about let's getting through the tactical list of things to do. What I love about what you're describing here, which I think is so essential, particularly in this current uncertain, volatile world, is the leader's responsibility to hold people able and for them to be able to spend some time together, understanding who you can be in order to achieve that. Yeah. As opposed to just the achievement list and what you need to get through. It's like, who are you? Who are you becoming? How can I help you become that? So that together we become even more powerful as a business.
Do you know what I think it is? I think it's connecting the practical, like, you've got this job title, you've achieved this, blah, 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 with an actual feeling. So they actually feel it, right? Yes. What, one of the questions I asked is what would, I've described this person. What would it feel like for you to wake up in the morning and know that you're this person, to know that you've got that responsibility and to know that you can handle it? What does that feel like? And, someone might explain to you various feelings, pride, they attach pride to it, right? I feel inspired. Okay. There's, you attach inspiration to it. I feel like I've got a legacy or I'm building a legacy. Okay, cool. I feel like I'm providing security to my family. You attach that to it. So you're basically building up this big emotional reason of why they need to get shit done. Yeah. So you don't, as a leader, you don't need to be there. Oh, you're okay. Motivation all the time. That is intrinsic. This person wants what's out there, and that comes from them. And so I think connecting it emotionally with the outcome is super important when you're trying to inspire a leader.
Yeah.
For me, the big emphasis here is in the power of the language we choose when supporting others under pressure. What Seb's describing is how he uses carefully chosen words to evoke an emotional connection for the person in front of him, to why what they're doing matters, why it's worth the extra effort, to power up their commitment and belief so they can achieve more than they think is possible. And what makes this even more powerful is talking to them about themselves in the third person. It distances them from themselves so that they can observe and appreciate what's possible. Emotions move us. The word emotions even has motion at its heart. Connecting ourselves and others emotionally to a moment in the future through a compelling and vivid picture can move us out of negative pressure and into a pressure that's galvanizing. It's the power of what I call a feel purpose. Here's a summary of the points Seb shared when he supports others through moments of pressure. 1. Power up their belief through the words you choose. 2. Offer them a wider perspective. 3. Paint a vivid and compelling future picture of what is possible. 4. Remind them of how far they've already come. And 5. Reframe what if it goes wrong to, well, what if it goes right?
That's a lovely segue, Seb, for you to offer your two pay forwards. So if someone's listening to this podcast and they're wanting to be better under pressure, from your point of view, what would be the two things you would pass to them? What would be your first?
So I think I've spoken a lot of what if already. Like, one of the things I always say to people is what if, right? And I know we've talked a little bit about that a few times in this. What if you could do it? What if you could become the person who does this? And that's borderline motivation for me, which I'm cautious not to give. So I'd rather give something practical.
Okay.
So something practical is, for a long time I was given meditation coaching, right? Training my mind through meditation, mindfulness, this sort of stuff. And what I loved about that was I took the lessons from that and I turned them into something very practical.
Good.
And it's funny when you talk about meditation, right? Just to go off piece a little bit. If I asked you to train every day for an hour, or every other day for an hour, right, lifting weights or whatever it was, you could probably do it and stick to it for 6 months, yeah. But if I said to you, I want you to do nothing, sit still, close your eyes, focus on your breathing for 10 minutes every day, you'd probably struggle to keep up with it. Why do people struggle so much with meditation? Probably because they they can't see the tangible results, the physical response, right? So I've got some techniques of that. But in terms of a practical technique I use, handling pressure is all about perspective. Perspective is influenced by your mindset, and your thoughts influence your mindset. So you've constantly got this, positive, negative, scarcity, abundance, thoughts and mindset coming in. And so a scarcity mindset is actually there to serve you. All of your thoughts are there to serve you. The scarcity mindset ones just tend to have terrible timing because it comes at a time where you're about to make a decision where you need courage, right? So one of the techniques I use is, when you're meditating, you close your eyes and a negative thought comes in, and one of the things I've taught myself to do is to say thank you for the thoughts, because they're there to serve me in some way, not look at them like some sort of negative thing. So thank you for the thoughts, park it and move on. But the practical element of this is I'll literally have on my phone, I've got a little notepad on my phone, and I write, I've written like 5,000 notes a year or something on there. And on that phone, one of the titles, and it's pinned to the top, it says, thank you for the thoughts. Whenever a negative or a scarcity mindset idea comes into my mind, we're not going to be able to sell this product, or I'm not going to be able to achieve this goal, or, we're not going to be able to do this, I'll write it down in there. So I've taken the negative thought, I've written it down to this notepad, and then I said, thank you for the thoughts, and I've closed the phone. And then when I'm in this positive mindset and I'm feeling like I've got this abundance mindset, I'll go into that notepad and reply to that thought. Now I'm in a better place to actually process that thought. You don't want to process it and try and provide logic around a scarcity mindset concept, right? So thank you for the thoughts, park it, and then you come back when you're feeling energized, you're feeling, you've got motivation to do this, you've got an abundance mindset, your energy is all playing to win. When the yes. energy of playing not to lose comes in, you park the thoughts. When the energy is playing to win, now you're in a place where you take action. We can do this because if you look at the past, over the last 6 months, I've achieved A, B, and C. That's all possible. I know that, having looked at looking logically over the next 6 months, looking at the data, it's likely we can do this. And I literally reason with that person. So I imagine. So
again, you go meta on yourself again, and almost that's so interesting because again, Anna Rafferty referenced that she's got a voice. Her thing is that she has a voice message, so she speaks to herself. And if it's not clear, she lets it all out into a voice note, and then she goes and does something completely else. Then she comes back to it and listens to it, and then coaches herself on the voicemail. So it's a similar thing, huh?
Yeah.
I love it.
Do you know what? We're always coaching. We're always being coached, right?
Yes.
Whether it's someone else coaching us, influencing us, or it's ourselves. And you've got to understand that there's an inner coach who's always influencing you all the time. And it's giving them the microphone when you're in the right energy, and taking the microphone off them when they haven't had their coffee. Do you know what I mean? So it's for me, it's so true. Acutely aware of that.
So true. It's like we're always practicing something.
Yeah.
It's whether what we're practicing is the most useful thing. Brilliant. Number 2, Seb, what would you say is your second?
Number 2 won't be as long, I promise. Number two, I would say this. I once had a parent that we interviewed the daughter for our book, Not a Victim, which is all about anti-bullying. And the daughter went through depression. She was suicidal. It was a really extreme case. And her dad was a fantastic mentor. And one of the things he would say to her as his daughter was going through this is he would say, just hold on when you're feeling like that, just for another 5 minutes, right? Just for another day. And that energy of just hold on and that mantra, one more minute. If it's something short you've got to do, like when I was fighting in Thailand and I'm injured and it's like, oh my God, there's no way I'm going to survive that. I'm going to get knocked out any second. Just hold on. I tie that very much to the energy of what if. Just hold on. What if you could do this? And so what I find is that people tend to give up when they see themselves and they feel that they can't do something. But if you just hold on, literally, 20, 30 seconds after that, and you breathe through it, that's where typically most of the gold happens. The reality is most people can't do that. They get to that stage, it becomes too much, and they exit, right? Yeah. But that's why all the good stuff happens just after that, because it's people who can just hold on. And if you have that mantra in your head, you tend to just hold on for that little bit longer. Those people tend to experience far more success in life. They're able to handle more pressure. And ultimately, if we're able to handle more pressure in life, we get rewarded for that, right? Like if you can handle more pressure, life will reward you more. And so it's having little techniques like that, which I think really helped me with handling pressure.
Pressure for better. I love 100%. It, Seb. Thank you so much. What a great and energizing conversation. I loved it.
Thank you for having me. I enjoyed it.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Better Under Pressure with me, Sarah Milne Rowe. If you enjoyed it, please do subscribe and let us know what you found useful or what you'd like to know more about. Our aim is to share as many examples as possible of what people do to manage pressure for better. If you're interested in any of the practices mentioned, check out my book, The Shed Method. Alternatively, you can find us at Coaching Impact or me on LinkedIn and Instagram. Better Under Pressure was produced by the fab team at Smart Cookie Media. Thanks so much for listening, and until next time, goodbye.
I really hope you enjoyed today's Warrior Academy podcast episode. We're going to keep creating these episodes because I know that so many parents find them useful or get insights or get ideas about how to develop their child's character. But it all comes down to the 3 C's: confidence, conduct, and concentration. So if you want to get a deep insight into the levels of confidence your child has, the level of concentration they have, or the level of conduct they have, so that you can actually put a score next to it and then work towards increasing those scores like we do in the Warrior Academy, then I'd love to invite you to fill in the Breakthrough Area Assessment. It takes about 5 minutes of your time, and you will get a personalized PDF report on your child's 3 C's. To access the Breakthrough Area Assessment and find out your child's 3 C's score, all you need to do is go to www.breakthrougharea.com.